Elena Voss sat in the observation gallery of the Galactic Council station, watching the stars drift past the massive windows. She had been humanity's ambassador for 12 years now, and in all that time, she had never felt so tired. The emergency session had been going on for 6 hours, and the council still couldn't agree on what to do. Down on the main floor, representatives from 43 different species argued about the Mirren situation. The Mirren were dying. Everyone knew it. The Kresh Dominion had invaded their worlds 3 weeks ago, and the reports coming back were horrific. Cities burned. Millions dead. The Mirren were artists and scholars, not warriors. They never stood a chance. Elena had presented the evidence herself. She had shown the council recordings of the attacks, testimonies from survivors, satellite images of the destruction. She had begged them to intervene. The Mirren needed help, and they needed it now. The vote came at hour 7. Economic sanctions against the Kresh Dominion. No military intervention. No rescue operations. Just sanctions that would take months to have any effect, if they worked at all. Elena watched the vote tally appear on the screens. 38 in favor of sanctions only. 5 abstentions. 0 votes for military action. She felt something cold settle in her chest. The Kresh representative, a towering creature named Vorak with 4 arms and scales like black metal, stood to address the council. The Galactic Council has made the wise choice, he said, his voice booming through the chamber. The Mirren worlds are now part of the Kresh Dominion. This is an internal matter. We thank the Council for respecting our sovereignty. Elena stood up in the gallery. Her movement caught Vorak's attention, and he looked up at her. For a moment, their eyes met across the chamber. Ambassador Voss, Vorak said, and his mouth parts twisted into what might have been a smile. I see the human is upset. Perhaps you should return to your meditation chambers and write another peace treaty. That is what your species does best, yes? You talk while others act. Several council members made sounds that might have been laughter. Humans had been part of the galactic community for 200 years, and in all that time, they had never fought a war. They mediated disputes. They negotiated treaties. They built hospitals and schools on war-torn worlds. The galaxy saw them as useful but weak, emotional creatures who preferred words to action. Elena said nothing. She simply turned and walked out of the gallery. Behind her, the council moved on to other business. The Mirren were already forgotten. Elena made her way through the station's corridors, her mind racing. She passed aliens of a dozen different species, all going about their daily business. None of them seemed concerned about what had just happened. To them, this was just politics. Just another vote. Just another species that was someone else's problem. She reached the human delegation quarters and entered her private office. The door sealed behind her with a soft hiss. Elena sat down at her desk and opened a secure connection to Earth. The face that appeared on her screen belonged to Director James Okonkwo, head of the Human Council. He looked old and tired, much like Elena felt. I watched the vote, he said before Elena could speak. I'm sorry, Elena. We tried, Elena said. Her voice sounded hollow to her own ears. We followed every diplomatic channel. We presented the evidence. We made the case. And they did nothing. Okonkwo was quiet for a moment. You know what this means, he finally said. Elena nodded. She had known this moment might come someday. Every human knew. It was part of their history, part of their collective memory. There were lines that couldn't be crossed, things that couldn't be ignored. And when those lines were crossed, when hope and diplomacy failed, humanity remembered what it used to be. My grandmother told me stories, Elena said quietly, about old Earth, about the wars before we reached the stars. She said humanity made a choice when we joined the galaxy. We chose to be better. We chose peace. We did, Okonkwo agreed. And we've kept that choice for 2 centuries. But the choice was always ours to make, Elena continued. Peace isn't surrender. It isn't weakness. It's choosing not to use the capacity for violence that we know we possess. Okonkwo leaned forward. Are you certain about this, Elena? Once we open this door, there's no closing it again. The galaxy will see us differently. They'll fear us. Elena thought about the Mirren. She thought about their poetry and their art. She thought about their children, learning in cities that should have been protected. She thought about the Council's laughter when Vorak mocked humanity for preferring peace. Let them fear us, she said. We tried hope. We tried diplomacy. We tried to build a galaxy where everyone was safe. And the Council chose convenience over justice. They chose comfort over courage. She took a deep breath. Send the message, Director. Initiate protocol remembered. Okonkwo nodded slowly. It will take 3 days to mobilize. The fleets are ready. They've been ready. They've been ready for 200 years, Elena said. We always knew this day might come. The connection ended. Elena sat alone in her office, feeling the weight of what she had just set in motion. Somewhere in the station, the Council was probably still debating trade agreements or colonization rights. They had no idea what was coming. Humanity had worn the mask of the peacemaker for so long that the galaxy had forgotten what lay beneath. They had forgotten that humans came from a world that tried to kill them at every turn. They had forgotten that humans were the species that hunted prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. They had forgotten that humans had nearly destroyed themselves in wars so terrible that they had vowed never to fight again, but a vow was still a choice. And the Kresh had made that choice impossible. Elena stood and walked to the window. Out there, beyond the station, beyond the Council's comfortable debate chambers, the Mirren was still dying. But not for much longer. The galaxy was about to learn that when humanity's hope turned violent, mercy itself became a weapon. And humanity had not forgotten how to wield it. 3 days after the Council vote, strange things started happening across human space. On Mars, the Museum of Human Conflict received an official order from Earth. Workers arrived in the middle of the night and began carefully removing exhibits. Ancient tanks that hadn't moved in centuries were loaded onto transport ships. Weapons that had been declared obsolete were wrapped in protective covers and carried away. The museum's director watched in silence as 200 years of carefully preserved history disappeared into the cargo holds of waiting vessels. On Europa Station, the shipyard suddenly came alive with activity. Ships that had been in long-term storage began their startup sequences. These weren't the sleek medical ships or comfortable colony transports that humanity was known for. These were different, longer, darker. Their hulls were covered in panels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A young Tekken trader named Zilix watched from his ship as dozens of these dark vessels powered up and moved away from the station. He had been trading with humans for years and thought he knew all their ship designs. He had never seen anything like these. What kind of ships are those? He asked the station controller. There was a long pause before the controller answered. Old ones, the human said simply. Across the human territories, military academies that supposedly taught historical warfare studies suddenly mobilized their students. Millions of young humans who had been learning about ancient battles and obsolete tactics received new orders. They weren't historians anymore. They were soldiers. They had always been soldiers. The Galactic Council didn't notice at first. They were used to human cargo ships moving through space. Humanity controlled a significant portion of galactic trade routes, so their vessels were everywhere. It wasn't until the 4th day that someone realized something was wrong. A Kresh patrol fleet was conducting routine operations near the Mirren homeworld when when their sensors detected 3 human cargo ships entering the system. The fleet commander, a veteran warrior named Crother, ordered his ships to intercept. Humans were weak. Their ships were slow. This would be easy. "Human vessels, you are in Kresh Dominion space," Crother transmitted. "Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." The human ships didn't respond. They didn't slow down. They just kept coming. Crother felt a flicker of annoyance. "Human vessels, this is your final warning. Power down or we will open fire." The response came in a voice that was cold and calm. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Human Defense Fleet. You have 45 seconds to evacuate this system." Crother's crew laughed. Human Defense Fleet? Humans didn't have a defense fleet. They had medical ships and negotiators. "You dare threaten the Kresh Dominion?" Crother roared. "Weapons. Target those ships. Destroy them." The weapons officer activated the targeting systems. The Kresh ships began to move into attack formation. Crother watched his tactical display with satisfaction. 3 cargo ships against 12 warships. This would take less than a minute. Then the human ships changed. Panels along their hulls slid open. Weapons ports that hadn't been visible before suddenly appeared. The ships didn't just reveal weapons. They transformed, unfolding like flowers of death. These weren't cargo ships at all. "What in the void?" Crother's weapons officer whispered. The human ships opened fire. Crother had been in dozens of battles. He had fought against the best warriors in the galaxy. He had never seen anything move like the human ships. They didn't just fire weapons. They danced. They twisted and turned with an impossible grace, their weapons striking with surgical precision. The first Kresh ship exploded in a ball of fire. Then the second. Then the third and fourth together. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Crother screamed, "Return fire!" The Kresh fleet scattered, trying to get distance, trying to target the human ships. It didn't matter. The humans anticipated every move. They were always one step ahead, always in the perfect position. Their weapons didn't miss. In 43 seconds, all 12 Kresh warships were destroyed. Crother's ship was the last to die. His final thought was confusion. Humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to be peaceful. What were these monsters wearing human skin? News of the battle spread quickly. The Kresh Dominion demanded an explanation from the Galactic Council. The Council summoned Ambassador Voss again, but she didn't come. Instead, they received a message. "The human delegation will address the Council in 3 days," the message said. "After the Mirren are free." The Council didn't understand. 3 human ships had destroyed a Kresh patrol fleet. Yes, but the Kresh Dominion had thousands of ships. Millions of soldiers occupied the Mirren worlds. 3 ships couldn't liberate an entire species. They were wrong about that too. Admiral Marcus Chun stood on the bridge of the carrier Indomitable, watching the tactical display. Behind his ship, 147 vessels of the Human Defense Fleet waited in formation. They had been ready for this mission for a long time. Too long. "Sir, we're in position," his tactical officer reported. "Slip space generators are charged. All ships report ready." Marcus looked at the display one more time. The Mirren homeworld was marked in red, surrounded by Kresh military installations. Intelligence reported over 200 Kresh warships in the system, along with thousands of ground troops. 200 years ago, humanity would have looked at those numbers and found them acceptable. Not good, not bad. Just acceptable odds for a species that had fought wars for its entire history. "All ships," Marcus said into the fleet communication channel. "This is Admiral Chun. You know what we're here to do. The Mirren are dying. The Council chose to do nothing. So we will do what we've always done. We will protect those who cannot protect themselves. He paused, thinking about the weight of what they were about to do. For 2 centuries, we chose peace. We chose to be mediators and healers. That choice was taken from us. The galaxy will see us differently after today. They will fear us. Let them. Fear is better than the alternative. Marcus took a deep breath. Engage slip space engines. All ships, battle formation on emergence. And remember, we're not here to conquer. We're here to remind the galaxy what humans are when you take away our hope. The fleet vanished in bursts of twisted light. When they emerged at the Mirren homeworld, the Kresh were waiting. But the Kresh had never fought humans before. They had never seen what humanity was capable of when it stopped holding back. The battle began, and the galaxy started learning a terrible lesson. Peace was always a choice, and humanity had made a different one. The Battle of Mirren lasted 17 hours. When it was over, the Kresh occupation force had been completely destroyed. Not defeated, not driven away. Destroyed. Admiral Marcus Chen walked through the main city of the Mirren homeworld, accompanied by a squad of human soldiers. Around them, Mirren civilians emerged from hiding, their large eyes wide with disbelief. Buildings were damaged, but the humans had been careful. Every shot had been precise. Every weapon strike had been calculated. They hadn't come to destroy the Mirren worlds. They had come to save them. A young Mirren approached Marcus cautiously. She was small, barely reaching his chest, with the delicate features typical of her species. "You are the humans?" she asked, her voice trembling. Marcus nodded. "We are. But the council said humans were peaceful. They said you only talked. They said you couldn't fight." Marcus knelt down so he was at eye level with her. "We are peaceful," he said gently. "But peaceful doesn't mean helpless. It means we choose not to fight. Your people needed help, and the council did nothing. So we chose differently." The young Mirren's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for choosing us." Marcus felt the weight of those words. For 200 years, humanity had chosen peace. They had been proud of that choice. But what good was peace if it meant watching innocents die? He stood and continued his walk through the city. Medical teams were already setting up aid stations. Engineers were assessing damage to critical infrastructure. Human soldiers helped Mirren civilians search through rubble for survivors. This was what humanity did best, Marcus thought. They protected. They healed. They built, but sometimes, before you could heal, you had to fight. Back on the Galactic Council station, Ambassador Elena Voss finally returned to address the council. She walked into the chamber wearing her formal diplomatic uniform, but something about her had changed. The other ambassadors saw it immediately. The gentle mediator was gone. In her place stood something harder, something ancient. The council president, a floating jellyfish-like creature named Desser, opened the emergency session. "Ambassador Voss, the Galactic Council demands an explanation for humanity's unprovoked military action against the Kresh Dominion." Elena looked around the chamber slowly. Every ambassador avoided her gaze. "Unprovoked?" she said quietly. "You watched the Mirren die. You saw the evidence. You voted to do nothing. And you call our response unprovoked?" Vorak, the Kresh representative, stood up angrily. His forearms gestured wildly. "You attacked Dominion forces. You destroyed our ships. This is an act of war." Elena turned to face him. "Yes," she said simply. "It is." The chamber fell silent. Humans didn't make declarations of war. Humans negotiated. Humans talked. They didn't fight. "The Galactic Council is shocked," Desser said, his voice quavering. "Humanity has been a member of this council for 200 years. Never once have you engaged in military action. Why now? Why break 2 centuries of peace?" Elena smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You misunderstand what our peace meant. You thought we were peaceful because we were weak, because we couldn't fight. You were wrong. She walked to the center of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Let me tell you about humanity. We come from a world that tried to kill us. Our planet had diseases, predators, natural disasters. We survived them all. Do you know how? We learned to be smarter than anything that wanted to eat us. We learned to be tougher than anything that wanted to kill us. And most importantly, we learned to be patient. Elena paused, letting her words sink in. Humans are persistence hunters. Do you know what that means? It means we chase our prey for days, for weeks if necessary. We don't stop. We don't give up. We follow until our prey collapses from exhaustion. That's how we survived. That's what we are. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. They had never heard a human speak like this before. We fought wars, Elena continued. Terrible wars. We developed weapons that could destroy our entire world. We nearly did destroy it. And then we looked at what we had become, and we were horrified. So we made a choice. We chose to be better. We chose peace. She turned to face the council president. The peace was always our choice to make. When you voted to abandon the Mirren, you took that choice away from us. You forced us to remember what we were before we chose peace. Vorak stepped forward. The Kresh Dominion has thousands of ships, millions of warriors. 3 of your ships destroyed 1 patrol fleet. You cannot win a war against us. Elena laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound. 3 ships? Vorak, we have over 3,000 warships. We've had them for 150 years. We've had them for 150 years. We've been preparing for this possibility since we joined the galaxy. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. 3,000 warships? That was impossible. The council had intelligence services. They would have known. You hid them, Desser accused. You lied to the council. We never lied, Elena corrected. You never asked. You assumed we were weak because we preferred diplomacy. You assumed we couldn't fight because we chose not to. Your assumptions were your own. She pulled up a holographic display. Images appeared in the center of the chamber, showing human military installations, shipyards, training facilities. We've been the most advanced military power in the galaxy for over a century. Our weapons technology is generations ahead of yours. Our ships are faster, stronger, more maneuverable. Our soldiers train their entire lives. The council stared at the images in horror. They had welcomed humanity as mediators, as peacekeepers. They had never suspected that these gentle diplomats were wolves in sheep's clothing. So here's what happens now, Elena said, her voice hard. The Kresh Dominion will withdraw from all Mirren territories immediately. You will pay reparations. You will face justice for your war crimes. And if you refuse, we will continue what we started. Vorak's scales rattled with rage. You cannot dictate terms to the Kresh. We will crush you. We will paint the stars with human blood. Elena met his gaze without flinching. Then let me be clear about what that means. If you declare war on humanity, we won't just defeat you. We will dismantle your entire empire. We will destroy every military installation. We will scatter every fleet. And we will do it without harming a single civilian, because that's what we do. We are very, very good at controlled violence. She walked closer to Vorak, and despite his size advantage, he stepped back. We don't want war, Vorak. We never did. But if you force us to fight, you'll learn why we chose peace in the first place. You'll learn what humans are when hope turns violent. The chamber was silent. Every ambassador understood the threat. Humanity had been holding back for 2 centuries. Now they had stopped, And the galaxy was about to change forever. The Kresh Dominion chose war. Varrock returned to his homeworld and convinced the Dominion's War Council that humanity was bluffing. 3,000 ships seemed like a lot, but the Kresh had more. They had size, strength, and the experience of countless conquests. Humans were still just the galaxy's mediators, playing at being warriors. The Dominion mobilized its full military might. 5,000 warships gathered at the Kresh homeworld. Millions of soldiers prepared for battle. They would crush humanity and remind the galaxy that the Kresh were the true power. Admiral Marcus Chun watched the Kresh fleet gathering on his tactical display. His own fleet waited at a safe distance, spread across multiple systems in small groups. The Kresh expected a massive battle. They expected humanity to meet their fleet head-on in a show of strength. They didn't understand humans at all. "Begin Phase 1, Marcus ordered. Human ships appeared throughout Kresh space, hitting military targets with surgical precision. They didn't engage the main fleet. They struck supply depots, fuel stations, weapons factories. Every installation that supported the Kresh war machine became a target. Human ships would appear, destroy their target, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. The Kresh fleet tried to respond, but how do you fight an enemy that won't meet you in battle? They split their forces, sending ships to defend their installations. The humans destroyed those ships in small, brutal engagements. Then they continued hitting targets. It wasn't war as the Kresh understood it. It was a systematic dismantling of their ability to fight. Within 2 weeks, the Kresh Dominion was in chaos. Their supply lines were broken. Their fleets couldn't refuel. Their factories were slag. And they still hadn't managed to engage the main human fleet in a proper battle. But the worst part was what happened on the Kresh-controlled worlds. Human ships broadcast messages to the subject species, the conquered peoples who had lived under Kresh rule for generations. The message was simple: overthrow your oppressors, and we will help you rebuild. Rebellions erupted across Kresh space. Species that had been enslaved for centuries saw their masters weakened and took their chance. The Kresh Dominion, which had seemed so strong, began to fracture from within. On the Galactic Council Station, Elena watched the reports with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She had never wanted this. None of humanity had wanted this. But the galaxy had forced their hand. The Council called another emergency session. This time, they weren't asking for explanations. They were begging humanity to stop. "The Kresh Dominion is collapsing," Thesser said. "Millions of beings are suffering because of this war. You've made your point, Ambassador Vos. Please, call off your fleets." Elena looked at the Council President with tired eyes. "We tried to prevent suffering," she said. "We tried to stop the Mirren genocide through diplomatic means. You voted against it. Now you complain that millions suffer because we chose to act where you wouldn't? But the cost," another ambassador protested. "The chaos, the instability, is less than what would have happened if we did nothing," Elena said firmly. "The Kresh would have continued conquering. More species would have suffered. More innocents would have died. We're ending that cycle by destroying an entire empire," Varrock said bitterly. He looked different now, defeated. His scales had lost their shine. "The Kresh Dominion has stood for 1,000 years. The Kresh Dominion stood on the backs of slaves," Elena replied. "On the graves of innocents. Yes, we're destroying it. But we're not destroying the Kresh people. We haven't targeted a single civilian population. Every species in your former empire has the chance to build something better." She turned to address the full council. "You need to understand something. Humanity didn't do this for conquest. We didn't do it for power. We did it because it was right. Because someone had to. Because hope without the will to defend it is just a pretty dream." The war ended 6 weeks after it began. The Kresh Dominion signed a surrender agreement, fracturing into 17 independent states. Some of these new nations were former subject species, finally free after generations of oppression. Others were Kresh territories that chose democracy over dictatorship. Human aid workers and engineers flooded into Kresh space, helping rebuild what the war had destroyed. 3 months after the liberation of the Mirren homeworld, the Galactic Council held a special session. They voted to establish the Galactic Protection Mandate, a rapid response force designed to prevent atrocities before they happened. Humanity would lead this force, with volunteer contributions from other species. The vote was unanimous. Every council member understood now. Peace required the capacity and willingness to fight for it. Elena stood in her quarters on the council station, packing her belongings. She was returning to Earth after 12 years as ambassador. Someone else would take her place. Someone who would help build this new galaxy where hope had teeth. Her communicator chimed. It was Admiral Chun. "I'm back on Earth," he said. "Thought you'd want to know. I'd visited the Museum of Human Conflict. They're putting everything back now. The wars are history again. Are they returning the ships to storage?" Elena asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "No, the ships will remain active. We'll never hide what we are again. But we'll only use them when necessary." Elena nodded. "That was right. That was how it should be. Do you think we did the right thing?" Marcus asked. Elena thought about the young Mirren who had thanked her for choosing them. She thought about the freed slaves celebrating on formerly conquered worlds. She thought about the new governments forming, based on justice rather than strength. "We did what the galaxy needed," she said. "We reminded everyone that peace isn't passive. It's not just the absence of war. Real peace requires the courage to fight for it when necessary." "The galaxy fears us now," Marcus said. "Good," Elena replied. "Fear will keep them honest. Fear will make them think twice before committing atrocities. And maybe, just maybe, that fear will lead to a truly peaceful galaxy. One where everyone knows that never again isn't just a phrase. It's a promise we'll enforce." She ended the call and looked out her window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Mirren were rebuilding their worlds. Former slaves were tasting freedom for the first time. A new generation was growing up in a galaxy where the strong couldn't prey on the weak. Without consequence, humanity had worn the mask of the peacekeeper for 200 years. Now the mask was off, and everyone could see what lay beneath. Not monsters, not conquerors, just people who believed that some things were worth fighting for, and who had the strength to back up that belief. Hope had turned violent, yes, but sometimes violence was hope's truest expression. Sometimes the only way to protect the innocent was to terrify the guilty. Sometimes peace required warriors who understood the cost of war and chose to pay it anyway. The galaxy had learned its lesson. And humanity had remembered an old truth. If you want peace, prepare for war. Because hope without the will to defend it dies young. But hope with teeth, hope that could bite back, hope that refused to surrender. That kind of hope changed the universe.